Hey, CNFers. Okay, so there was this time when Roger Federer, one of the greatest tennis players in the world, did not use a coach. He was like, bro, I'm good. I'm the best. Single hand, backhand, all day long. But at some point, during his plight to stay on top, the greatest player of his time, for a time, it's arguable whether or not he's still, okay, whatever, it's neither here nor there. He hired a coach. He needed someone to see what he could no longer see. Likewise, if you're a writer working in memoir or sports, you have my area of expertise. I'm not going to throw a blanket over the entire CNF and world. And you're ready to level up? Someone to hold you accountable? Email me at brendan@brendanomeara.com, hey, and we'll start a dialogue. I'd be honored and thrilled to help you get where you want to go. Oh, and yes, by the way, call for submissions for issue 4 of the audio magazine. It's themed codes. Codes to live by. Mantras, personal beliefs, rules. Oppressive, liberating. I love people who are so principled they live by a code. Captain Fantastic or the Mandalorian. This is the way. Give me your best 2,000 words or fewer essays about codes. Email creativenonfictionpodcast@gmail.com with code in the subject line. Simultaneous submissions are fine. But if you have a piece accepted by another publication or you're holding out for a more prestigious publication, let me know ASAP so I don't read and edit your piece, because I even give notes to rejected essays. I mean, what a guy. And so if it's going to be taken elsewhere, I just want to save me the time. I appreciate it. Deadline is October 31st. This is the way.
All of a sudden, I'm running in traffic after her, and cars are screeching and honking. And I remember her green leash was bouncing behind her. And I was thinking, holy God, she's going to get run over and I'm going to watch, and this is my fault.
Oh, yes. This is the Creative Nonfiction Podcast, the non-award nominated podcast where I speak to badass people about the art and craft of telling true stories. I'm Brendan O'Meara. How's it going? Meredith May returns. Excellent. Little inside joke there. She's got a new book out, Loving Edie, How a Dog Afraid of Everything Taught Me to Be Brave. It is published by Park Row Books. Much better. Much better, kid. She's also the author of The Honey Bus, which was one of my favorite memoirs of 2019. Even to this day, one of my favorite memoirs. And I read a lot of those things, and I really like it. Yeah. In this interview, we talk about the adjustments you sometimes need to make for the dog in your life. Hashtag Kevin. How Meredith approached the topic despite the myriad titles of dogs' books on the shelves, what she learned about herself and her marriage, how it tested her marriage, this little puppy, and the community aspect of writing, lifting other people up, and of course, a recommendation. I want to remind you to keep the conversation going on Twitter, @CNFPod, or @Creative Nonfiction Podcast on Instagram. You can also support the podcast by becoming a paid member, patreon.com/CNFpod. As I said, the show is free, but it sure as hell ain't cheap. Members get transcripts when I get around to them. They're coming. They drip in. Chances to ask questions of future guests. Few people take up that offer when I put up a poll, but, whatever. It's there. It's there for the taking if you want it. You just have a fruit that does not go bad on the vine, and if you want that fruit, go and grab it. It'll hang there lonely, but never mind. Special podcasts coming down, like a month in review type things, fun stuff. Free ways to support the show. You can always leave a kind review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify. Written reviews for our little podcast that could go a long way towards validating it for the wayward CNFer. Hello there. No new reviews to read. I know, but if you publish one, this is where I read it. I will read it right here and give you the shout-out you deserve, man. Be sure you're heading over to brendanomeara.com for show notes and to sign up for my up to 11 Rage Against the Algorithm CNF and monthly newsletter. Say that 11 times fast. First of the month, no spam. So far as I can tell, you can't beat it. All right. Really, is that it? That seems short for an intro. Doesn't matter. Enough's enough. It's time to welcome Meredith back to the show from episode 147 to 312. What are we even doing in this world? This is what we do. Many, with the advent or the publication of, say, Marley and Me, all of a sudden there's like lots of dog books over the years, and you have like John Katz, who's like made a career out of writing any number of dog books, who I'm sure you're familiar with. What was it like when you were like, all right, I've got this story about my puppy, and what was it like for you to kind of step into the arena of something that is populated with so many different books? Like, so your take, Meredith's take.
Well, I was a little naive. I didn't know I was stepping into an arena. I mean, of course, I knew of Marley and Me, and some of those big ones. I was looking at it more as, this is what's going on in my life right now. This is what's overtaking my relationship and my life right now. And it was so big when it was happening that that's what I wanted to write about. That's how I process. That's how I figure out how to get through things as a human, is by writing it down. And so I called my agent, and they all knew I had this cute puppy because I was constantly sending photos, but I finally called and said, okay, cute puppy has a huge issue and I need to write about it because I don't know where this is going. And all I had to do was say puppy. And my agent said, yes. She didn't hear the whole pitch, actually. I'm remembering. So that was my first clue that dog books are good sellers or popular. Then I went to do the research and, okay, what else is out there besides Marley and Me and, Racing in the Rain? And I thought, whoopsie, I just dove into a really huge ocean. And it was a little intimidating, but I read a lot of books about dogs, and I thought I was a little original writing about how a dog changed me as a person. I realized that's what every writer does when they write about their dog.
Right. And to that point, as you're doing that market research and then trying to answer that question, like kind of like, well, why now and what new can be said about it? How are you answering that question? Like, okay, what is the new thing that I can bring to the canon of dog books?
Well, dog books fall into two kinds. One I found was more scientific / dog training. So I read some books about, dog lovers who were scientists and trained their dog to go into an MRI machine to study their brain and to try to figure out where's that, and then show the dog images of things it likes to see if areas light up when they're happy, and how does a dog love you? So there's that sort of scientific side. And then the other side is about relationships with dogs and what they do to you. But a lot of the relationship books I found were different than mine. They were more about overcoming a trauma, depression, sexual abuse, violence. There's this beautiful loyalty of dogs that fills holes in people. And so my book was a little different in that I thought I was writing about a dog with extreme anxiety, and I wanted to write about dog emotions and how I was discovering they're real and how to work with a dog that is highly sensitive like mine. I thought my book would be like instructional, and it didn't really dawn on me until I had almost finished it that I was writing about how a neurotic dog was showing me that I was neurotic about her neuroses, and I was the one who needed to change, and she was just fine. She's just different. She doesn't need to be what I hoped she was.
Yeah, I think it also it gets to this point of when a lot of us, either whether we get puppies or rescue dogs, that we want them to really integrate into our lives seamlessly, in a sense where they do all the adjusting to our lives and enriching our lives. And what you found through this book was she was very much a square peg in the round hole of your lives, and it was just like, why won't you fit here? And eventually you're like, oh, we have to, for once, the way we might with like human babies, actually adjust our lives around the dog. And it's a way, it's so antithetical to how we raise dogs. So I think that was such a formative, I don't know, spine of this book, was you having to really adjust to the dog, whereas, and struggling to do so.
Yes, exactly. It's a book about me thinking I knew everything about dogs, because Edie is my third golden retriever, but I had two exceptional dogs before her and hadn't realized it. I didn't have to do any work with those dogs. They were just easy, and they made my life fun. And there's a huge dog culture in San Francisco. And then even within that, the gay community in the dog culture is so tight knit. Like your dog is your replacement for your child, or it's an expression of you, or it's, even to some point, like fashion, and right. This whole community, your ticket to it is to have a dog. You get invited to the cocktail parties on top of Wag Hotel. And, it's just a super fun community to be a part of. And I just wanted to keep the party going. And so I got this dog, and she made me, put on the brake and grow up and realize that, she's not here for my entertainment. She's here to teach me something that I don't even know I need to learn yet.
Yeah, we just adopted another dog, a German Shepherd mix that we named. She's a girl. We named her Kevin, and it's great. She responds to it too, which is awesome. But her separation anxiety is next level. It was so, we got her initially for our other dog, Hank. We're like, oh, we feel like he could use a buddy, play pal. And it turns out he likes her, but he's kind of indifferent to her. And so then we adopt Kevin, and she's got major separation issues. In the first couple of weeks we had her, we had our dog crate for her, and we're like, oh, let's see how she does in there if we leave for 5 minutes. And we set up a phone and a video to video her. And so we left for 5 minutes. And it was some of the most disturbing video we've ever seen, because she was just attacking the cage. She was biting at it. Like, she could have broken her teeth. And so at that point, we realized just what a handful we had. And so since that day, about 6 or 7 weeks ago, when we did that experiment, we can't leave her alone. We're now working with a behaviorist, and she's on some Clomicalm as well to just work with the separation. And so reading your book, long way of me saying, reading your book, I was really relating to how you had to really fundamentally change your lives to accommodate and to provide the kind of solace and relief and a good loving home for this other animal. Like, you really had to change for her instead of the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, both of us, we didn't quite get it the first time. Yet we did the same thing. We hired our puppy school trainer, who is a behaviorist, to come to the house and help us with this. And she was gently trying to tell us that, you can't just take this dog with you everywhere you want to go like you used to. You have to consider what the impact is going to be on her, and, have either don't go, or go at a different time when it's quieter, or have a plan B, or change your schedule. And, we would try to follow the rules, but then we just really would want to do something, and we think, maybe she's ready. We've been working with her for a month. Maybe she's ready to handle this. And we kept trying to get her to, I don't know, I'll give an example, to go with us to a restaurant that is dog friendly. We heard our behaviorist, but we didn't want to hear her, so we would sort of half-ass follow her recommendations. And, it really got to the point where we finally just had to realize that we've got to change for her. And, the changing is not been horrible. I mean, we have to reframe what it is. And the reward for being there for her and making her more comfortable and making her happy is better than getting to go to that restaurant, but like you said, thankfully she does not have separation anxiety. She's got every single other one under the sun, but and we do put the baby cam up and keep an eye on her when she's alone in the house, just in case, but she loves it. She just sleeps. But I had to learn how to work with a dog like this, which was very different. I did a lot of reading about counter conditioning and how you have to work them out of their fears slowly. I guess I'll give you an example. Like, she used to be really afraid of traffic. If a car went by, she would just freeze up and then take off. So obviously she's always on a leash, but now when cars go by, we tell her to sit and we give her cookies and we tell her what a great dog she is. So now a car is like the candy man. She hears a car, she sits and looks at me like, feed me,
Yeah,
so she like got over traffic. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it's to that point too. Like, we're we love to go hiking, and we took Kevin out and Hank a few weeks ago, and it was just kind of a nightmare. It was like she was on panic mode the whole time. Even on the trail, she was just like yelping and barking and just all over the place, so frenetic. And it's just like, oh boy, all right, so here's another thing, like right now, or maybe ever, but I think right now it's just like we can't do. We have to like slowly introduce her and start her world small and then start to expand it. So again, that's just another thing that I was really, really connecting with in your book, like where you had to really start small and then gradually build out her borders. So it's just that must have been really, I got it gleaned from the book, but it must have just been a huge challenge for you, especially given your experience with Stella and Layla.
Yeah. For example, like the hike, when you take your dog hiking, what do? You drive to the trailhead, you park, you put on the leash, you're like, let's hike. And with a dog like the kind we have, they need time to get used to the place first. You can't go from jump. They have to smell it. They have to sit in the car and look at it. Like, maybe that's all they can do that day is just look at it. And then you have to come back and maybe they take a walk around the car. And that's a win. You have to change your idea of what a win is with a dog like this. But, it makes perfect sense to want to just hike and get frustrated that they're not hiking and then think that they're being ornery or, I had to unlearn all this stuff. And I thought I was a really compassionate animal person, but I wasn't. I was irritated because she wasn't giving me the dog life I wanted, So maybe you take a few steps and they get tons of praise. Maybe you bring some of her dog friends with her. Maybe you just sit on a bench, and then you have to let the dog make the next move when they're ready. And that was something I had to learn too, because I thought, well, you're not a very good dog trainer person if you're letting the dog run you. That was kind of what I was thinking. But with a dog that's sensitive, if you push them, they're going to not trust you. And then it's all over. They won't do anything.
Yeah, and that was especially poignant for you, just someone who had the such great experiences with your previous golden retrievers, and then Jen, your wife, was a bit reluctant to bring in a dog based on childhood experience, but also just knowing the responsibility of it all. So the fact that you guys had to so fundamentally change your lives at this point in your lives with this particular dog, that's just such a core element of this book. And was that always going to be part of this book, that it was also going to be kind of like your marriage is told through your relationship with Edie?
Not at the beginning. My editor knew it was, but I didn't. Mm-hmm. I thought I was writing about the dog, but actually I wasn't. I was writing about how the dog affected me and made me into a better person, and how also it strengthened it. I did get what I wanted. I thought a puppy would complete our family and strengthen our bond. And ultimately that is what happened, but it really put us through the ringer. It's like you said, Jen was reticent. It took me about a year of gentle persuasion. And she's the more responsible one in the relationship. And she grew up with a stepfather who was pretty cruel. And this is in rural Humboldt. And she would bring home strays, cats, and one time a dog. And he inevitably would get tired of them or irritated by them and make them go away under, mysterious circumstances. And so she had her heart broken as a little girl and never grew up knowing what it's like to have, a buddy. And I really wanted that for her. And so I was putting a lot on Edie to do for us and for my wife. And when it wasn't going as planned, and I'm the stay-at-home writer and she's the go-to-work police lieutenant during the week, and I'm the one who's increasingly being held captive in a house by an agoraphobic dog puppy with a lot of energy and cabin fever. Edie and I were going bonkers, and I started resenting my wife for not picking up on it and helping more. And it really started to sound like, I think at one point I said, it's just like you're the stepfather who does comes in at the end of the day and spends an hour with the kid, and that's it. And we started sounding like, a 50s heterosexual couple having an argument about our kids. So, it tested us, but in a way that ended up being very necessary and told us a lot about each other and how much we were willing to do to make it work.
Yeah, and given how Edie, you mentioned earlier, really overtook your life in such a way, what would you identify as maybe the nadir of her first year as a puppy, where you were I don't know, are we the right people to usher her through her life?
Well, no, exactly. The breaking point came when this is in a period where we were really thinking we could bring Edie to a restaurant. And we were in Carmel, and Edie was under our table and tied to my chair and happily gnawing on a bone. And we were so thrilled because it was turning out to be the first time she could do this. And this is back in the phase when we were thinking she just has extreme puppy fear. She doesn't have a clinical issue. And the chef, who was a friend, came up to our table and startled her, and she bolted. I got up to hug him, so all of a sudden she was free, but the chair was toppled over, chasing her, scared her more, and she just ran out of the courtyard of the restaurant and into traffic, running uphill against 2 lanes of oncoming traffic. So she was running in the middle of 2 lanes of traffic. And I don't even remember getting up. All of a sudden I'm running in traffic after her, and cars are screeching and honking, and I remember her green leash was bouncing behind her. And I was thinking, holy God, she's going to get run over and I'm going to watch, and this is my fault. And I turned, and Jen was next to me running. I don't remember how she got there. And eventually, this is the middle of the book, so I'm not giving anything away. Jen was able to find her 7 or 8 streets away. And we were driving home to San Francisco after that. And we were having a real frank conversation. And Jen was saying, this dog may be too sensitive for the world. This dog may not be able to function. And Jen was saying, what if she'd caused an accident? What if a person had died? And we just had that really hard conversation. Like, can we do this? Is this dog so damaged that she is just eventually going to have an accident anyway? Or do we know anybody who has a farm who could take her? I mean, we were going through all the emotions and we slept on it. Well, I woke up and Jen wasn't in the bed, and I found her in the middle of the night crying in the living room. And she said, "Okay, Meredith, we'll try one more year." And so thank goodness we took a breath and thought about it and decided, no one can do this but us. We can't give her back. We can't bring her to a shelter or give her to a friend, because I think to have to start over with a dog like that, we already had, I just was afraid, like, who else is going to take care of her the way we can? I don't want to give her away.
Right. Yeah. It got me thinking too about how many animals of this nature that are they have the issues they have, and they get surrendered to a shelter, and that's a whole extra layer of trauma that they're going to have to deal with. And it's like, what hands are they going to land in? Are they going to land, even the most well-intentioned caretakers, like, can they even afford the medication, the vet bills, special trainers, specialist trainers? And it's like, it's amazing. To me, it just got me thinking, like, for Kevin's sake, we're lucky in the sense that we can. She's going to bankrupt us, I feel, but at this time we can afford to give her the care she needs and the therapy that she needs to live a good life. But how many, I don't know, thousands of dogs out there aren't afforded that luxury, even with the most well-intentioned adopters of these animals? Yeah,
I think, when I had my first Golden, I was in my 20s. I couldn't have handled this. No way. Right. I didn't have the money, but I also didn't have the time. I didn't have the freedom. I was working full time for newspapers. I couldn't have left her alone during the day like I did with my other, well-adjusted dogs. And I think after that traffic disaster with Edie and Carmel, that's what really got me thinking, because we were seriously thinking, okay, do we find a friend to take the dog? Do we surrender the dog? And I started imagining who would take her next. And it horrified me. What if, a well-intentioned parent picked up Edie for their kid, which happens a lot. Like, let's get the kids a dog. Like, that would have been a disaster. She's afraid of loud children. So yeah, it was a turning point, because I thought, if not me, who? And I'm now at a point in my career where I'm a little more in charge of my time, and I have a little more disposable income, and it has to be me. I made a commitment to this dog. I've got to see it through.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll never forget when we filmed Kevin in her crate there, like, when we left her, she would look normal. She looked a little confused, like, "Oh, where are you going?" Okay, whatever. And we left. And then when we got back, she was still assuming a very similar posture, though the bed in her crate was just a little bunched up. I'm like, okay, she probably just dug a little. She was probably a little anxious and was just kind of digging at it. But otherwise, physically, she looked kind of like how we left her. And had we not seen that video, we wouldn't have known the extent to which she was in a full-on panic. And we're lucky in a sense right now that we can stay home and work and not. Melanie at times has to go to the office. Right now, I'm lucky in that we're still office prohibitive, so I can stay. And she's not allowed in a crate, and she's not allowed to be alone. But how many other people might have put her in her crate and not realize the extent to which she was panicking, and be like, okay, go in there, and then they go to work and come back, and just think of that. I just think of that, like, the horror that she would be under for like several hours at a time, where she would be a physical harm to herself and probably break all her teeth, which is, I can't imagine. I can't believe she didn't break a tooth the way she was going at her cage that one day. Yeah.
And I think there's growing recognition that dogs have serious emotions. and that there, there's more to having a dog than simply molding them and training them into, the perfect obedient soldier. And did you say that Kevin was a rescue?
Yeah, she had been surrendered on 2 different occasions. One under definite neglect. She was underweight and had yeast infection all over her skin, lost a lot of fur. And then the second time she was surrendered was she had kind of regained some of her weight. The skin had cleared up, fur came back, but she's a bit of a barker, and it comes from a lot of that separation. I assume that maybe those previous owners, that maybe they lived in an apartment, and she's, for kind of a little dog, she's got a big bark. She's got that big German Shepherd bark, and she was surrendered as a result of like this excessive barking. So yeah, surrendered on 2 different occasions. So yeah, we're dealing with that, not knowing the previous, 5 years of her life to that point.
Right. But that makes sense, doesn't it? That she is terrified of being abandoned a 3rd time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking of something I read when I was reading about dogs with issues, and it was a separation anxiety chapter, and they sort of counter conditioned the dog to it by just leaving for 30 seconds and coming back and giving them treats, and then same thing we're talking about in the hike. But I wonder if your behaviorist talked to you about that, and if but maybe with a dog like yours, even that wouldn't help them get over it.
Yeah, what we're doing right now, we're in the first month of it, and we can, I think, afford 2 months of it, and then we'll have to try to do it from ourselves from there. It's kind of like the missions are like, okay, we're seated at a table. All right, we exit and enter through our garage door primarily. So it would be like, okay, walk halfway to the garage door, stand there for 3 seconds, walk back, and then make notes about what she's doing. And then another time be like, walk all the way to the door, put hand on doorknob, jiggle the handle, walk back. Yep. And it's a lot of these very little baby steps. And she's definitely with the pharmaceuticals and that degree of these baby steps and trying to interrupt her assumptions at times, because she'll try to run ahead of us because she wants to block us, or she's excited to go because she loves getting in the car. So she's like, all right, so I'm going to the car. She runs to the door. So sometimes she's showing those improvements of like hanging back a little, not always having to get up in front of us and block the door. Mm-hmm. So it's all of these little things. And sometimes you'll just stay laying on the floor, and which is a big win when she's able to do that. So we have to really celebrate those when she just
you get to get like crazy excited for Okay. Yeah. So you're doing it. You're doing the micro dosing, the micro lessons, and that's really great, and for me, I'm a very impatient person. Well, I'm much less now that I have this dog. And so I would want to see results more quickly, and it's hard when you're doing that. But yeah, a win is like she lays down longer before panicking. Yeah.
Yeah. Big time. And it's exactly. It's really had to kind of recalibrate what it means to kind of bring a dog along and make it comfortable. Whereas kind of what we were talking before, hey, you want this companion to just kind of go with you everywhere and have it reflect kindly on you and your personality and everything. Whereas, right now she's kind of a monster when she's out in public, and understandably so. We get it. But it's one of those things. Okay, we got to go all the way back and just try to rewire this brain a little bit. It's I mean it's a lot, but to your point of feeling impatient, like we're kind of the same way. Like, oh yeah, we want to be able on the weekend go out and do those hikes and get out there, work up a sweat, see some cool things. But right now it's like we just can't right now. And occasionally have a dog sitter come over because we have some tickets to baseball games. So we had some sitters come over and watch her, and she actually did okay. With other people. She just right now cannot be left alone.
Same. Yeah. So instead of a hike, maybe you have a sit down picnic, and, you bring some good beer and you make it just as awesome as a real hike would have been. You just have to, change your expectations.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. How hard was that for you to change your expectations, or how have you gotten comfortable with it now having her for a couple years?
Well, my wife, Jen, is really good at reframing. As a police lieutenant and one of the she's one of the highest ranking women. She was in the San Francisco Police Department. And so she was, around a lot of colleagues, and, that would challenge her. And then when she was on the street, she was around a lot of people who didn't want to be arrested. And she is really good at verbal judo. And so she uses it on me. And she'll say things like, well, that was as far as Edie could go today. Or, she'll look for the win and pull it out of my brain, which was looking for the disappointment, So Jen was wonderful and just helping me see all that we were doing for Edie and to notice her growth. And also, I want to say just learning to slow down. We couldn't go out as much, obviously. Like, yes, if we have to go somewhere together, we have to have, for more than a couple of hours, we have to have someone come to the house with Edie, or Edie goes with us in the car. She loves being in the car. It's like her little den. And I have blackout screens on all the windows, and I play soft dog music for her, chill music, and the whole bit. But you were asking, how did I learn to change my expectations? I learned to love staying home more, which kind of thankfully coincided with a pandemic, not right. thankfully.
Yeah.
So, I got real used to, just being with her here, and here meaning the house. And our house is backed up to the Los Padres National Forest. So I had the time and to slowly work her up to taking hikes in isolated places nearby that we can walk to. So, and it's really lovely. I actually love that more than being able to take her to a restaurant or down a busy sidewalk somewhere. So it worked out organically.
Yeah, you're kind of alluding to it, but how did you learn to not feel as trapped, given that she often had you housebound, and kind of relearning what it is to have she fundamentally changed your lives, and you truly were like kind of locked in the house with her. You said that cabin fever is a real thing. So how did you learn to embrace that?
Edie's sensitivity to the city and her sort of irritation with the city was kind of mirroring our feelings about living in an urban environment. I mean, both of us moved to San Francisco in our 20s, which is like when everyone does. It's it's perfect for that. But as we were, approaching 50, we were getting sort of exhausted by looking for parking spaces and standing in line for everything and $10 lattes. And, it was just getting to be not fun anymore. We were getting to be those like cranky people who want to eat at 5 and go to bed at 9. So we the long-term plan when she retired, it was our plan was a 2 to 3 year plan, was to move back to my hometown in Carmel Valley. So we were very casually just keeping an eye on the market to see what we could be able to afford. And when Edie came along, that sort of sped that up. And we decided, let's just start really looking. And by some miracle, if we find something, we'll live separately until she retires. And that's what we ended up doing. We started more earnestly looking, and then in a day we found our forever house, and we put in an offer that day, and it was accepted 2 days later. And then all of a sudden we're like, did we just do this? And so Edie nudged that along. I'm not the kind of person that buys a house for my dog. It was part of the plan, but
right.
I guess I'll speak for myself. We're both so happy here. We both feel so good. We love it. And it's quiet. And we would not have done it this fast had it not been for this dog that was initially a huge disappointment.
In reading the book too, I love the little the grace notes of the honey bus in there, and like your grandfather and some of the things that you the kind of echo from Honey Bus. I love that book so much, and just to hear it, like to kind of see your grandfather again, and just like the homages to the bees and in Carmel Valley where you grew up, and but also those. Some of the darker elements of how your relationship with your mother at the time, which to me was kind of an undercurrent of this book, because you bring up motherhood a bunch and your insecurities about motherhood, and how Edie, in a sense, gave you guys that almost that more human motherly element that you guys just you weren't comfortable with based on your upbringing. So I really like those elements that you were able to tie into it, and I really felt that undercurrent throughout the whole book, which I feel like was part of your intent.
Yeah, they say that the dogs that come into your life are there to teach you something you don't even know you need to learn, and that's definitely true. I think part of the reason I resisted so much letting Edie be Edie and was that I was worried she was going to require so much work, and it was going to be a subtraction from what I wanted to do with my life, and I was going to be ruled by this dog, and then I started thinking that, God, that sounds familiar. What am? And that's my mother. My mother. If you haven't read my first book, which is about my childhood, not you, Brendan, listeners out there, she openly she was a depressed divorcee who really took to bed after the breakup and never quite got out of it, and would openly rue the day she got married and had kids, and children were always a burden, and we were the reason her life didn't turn out the way she wanted. So I guess I absorbed some of that, and I have half of her DNA, and I always, growing up, never saw myself as a mother. I worried that I wouldn't be able to be a writer. I don't, that makes no sense, but I just wanted to make sure I was happy and doing what I wanted to do before I decided to have children. And I think it's because I saw my mother complain constantly about the choices she made in her life. So I think that was my resistance to Edie needing constant, lifelong protection and care, and not being my entertaining sidekick that made me popular. It's a very, very selfish way of looking at it. But the lesson I needed to learn was that, one, I can mother something, and I can like it, and it can be an addition to my life.
Yeah, you wrote late in the book, deep down I always worried that I had inherited my mother's belief that to give birth is to die yourself, to forfeit your individual happiness for the drudgery and subservience of parenthood. And like that.
Well, I must have been in a mood that day.
Well, I totally get what you're talking about too. Like, my wife and I we don't want kids or don't plan on it. And but I think a part of the reason why I just don't have any sort of paternal instinct at all is growing up, my dad would always complain about how noisy kids were. How even though he was a teacher, and he was a high school teacher, and he was a coach, so he was always around kids, and his livelihood depended on him. But he just constantly complained about the nuisance and inconvenience of noisy children, of just what a pain in the ass they were. Like, and that gets drummed into your head, and and it just like, okay, like maybe on some level it's like looking for approval. Like, all right, I'm not going to be one of the ones contributing to the population, so there's a win. But then it's just like, well, if it gets drummed into your head like that, it's like, why would you even want to pursue it? It's like, so it's like I feel it's a different level, but I understand what you're talking about there with that, like the drudgery that it is, like a net loss, and that there are these anchors that bring you down, and like your life is over because of it.
So we're from the same club. Yeah. But what's funny is if, you overheard me on the phone talking to Jen about our dog, Jen will say something like, oh, I took Edie, down the street to so-and-so's house to meet the foster dog that they're fostering. And I'd be saying, oh, how'd she do? Did she play well with the others? And is she, was she scared or did she pick up any toy? And yeah, it's can be shockingly similar to some of the conversations my, real parent friends have. So, and I really, I'm smiling as I'm talking right now because I'm so proud of her. She's really come a long way, and, she can do some things that she couldn't do before. And she's actually, I'm standing in her dog bed right in my closet right now for good sound, and she's curled up on my feet. But, I feel she brings me great joy knowing that I'm her home base. And if she gets scared, she doesn't flee anymore. She runs to me. She looks for me and runs to me. And that is everything.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. And, what else? The other day, I was just kind of, feeling gloomy, and as I'm wanting to do. And I,
as an artist, sometimes
I know I'm just like a brooder. Like if you looked at my journals, you'd be like, oh my God, like BO, you need some help, buddy. But in any case, I was just feeling like, down in the dumps. But then I working on this book and book proposal, and I just wrote I had a bunch of newspaper stuff, a bunch of things, and I ended up writing about 300-ish words, which is a big win. And I felt great after. I was like, wow, that was nice. And I think oftentimes we sometimes forget that writing can be a great source of joy and energy in our lives. And so we complain like, oh my God, the writing is so torturous. But I drew such energy from it. It actually had a very antidepressant effect. And I wonder for you, with writing, and maybe not to the extent that I just described, but how do you maintain the joy of it and not get pulled down into the stereotypical mire of the tortured writer?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes when that's like two sides, the double-headed, artist, right? And sometimes I do find myself going that way, like, oh, I can't get a good sentence to save my life, or I've, procrastinating and I've cleaned the whole house and I still haven't walked over to my desk. But, the real trick for me is to just, and I don't know who said this. I want to say Philip Roth, but if I just keep reminding myself that nobody writes the way I do, because every single person can take that into themselves. Like no one is going to put the sentence together the way Meredith May would. So that in and of itself means that, it might not come out well the first time, but it's going to come out. It's going to be you. It's going to be your voice. And that's all you need. I think sometimes, we all writers work alone, and we all work differently, and we all think that there's this idea out there of how a writer is supposed to work, like how many words a day or how quickly do the ideas come. And we hold ourselves up to this imaginary uber writer hero person and then start feeling bad about ourselves. I didn't get invited to that book writer conference, but look at all those other writers, and you scroll through and, it's just,
I'm on this panel. I'm on like 5 panels this year. I'm like, go fuck yourself. I don't.
And but at the end of the day, you are still leaving your mark. And that's all that matters. And that you can do it and you're doing it, that's enough. So I actually wrote on a little card, nobody writes the way you do. And I circled you, and that's right under my screen on my desk. Like that's all you need. That's all that you should be holding yourself to, not to what you think you should be doing.
Oh, for sure. And from our first conversation, I brought up the whole, the comparison and jealousy thing that I like talking to people about because it's definitely real. And you called it the comparison Olympics, and it's a term I refer to over and over again. Even when I ask people on the show, like I'll use that term, and sometimes I give you credit for it, sometimes I don't. But sometimes I just say, sometimes I just say, the comparison Olympics. Yeah. And it's just like how it really brings you down, and really the only, because you just never, because that avatar of the writer on getting all the grants, being a staff writer in a prominent newspaper or magazine, and it's just like you compare yourself to that while you're here just struggling to get anything down, and it is just such a sewer. It just does you no good.
Yeah, and it's a infinite loop, right? Because say you do achieve something that you think is worthy, but then when you're in that pool of writers, well, wait a minute, these writers have fellowships, or these writers are teaching positions. Well, now I want that, and no matter where you go on your perceived ladder, you're always going to be playing catch up if you have that mindset. And then you're really sucking away the space in your brain for joy and bliss and creativity, and wake up in the middle of the night with a killer idea. Where's my notebook time? Like you're eroding that because all you're doing is looking around at other people. Yeah.
I've said this before, but I feel like I truly wasted almost my entire 30s with this very notion and this topic. And I was just so desperate. Desperate was a good word for that decade for me. Just desperate to get some traction, to get a toehold on anything. And I was always looking I wasn't afraid to do the work, but I wanted to make sure the work I was doing felt like I was, and you do crew. It was like I wanted all the oars to be going in the same direction. So at least my effort is being forwardly propulsed. And I just was so desperate looking for a playbook or a roadmap. And the more and more as I've sort of developed in this, and this show has been a great tool of therapy, if you will, is that really nobody has any idea what they're doing. And no one, I couldn't take your playbook and make a successful career for me out of it. You just have to really fumble your way through, and then you'll pick your head up and you'll look behind you and you'll be like, oh, there's a body of work back there. I don't know how that happened, but it's there.
Right. I remember signing my very first book contract, and then afterwards I was like, okay, well, who's going to tell me how to write this book? And I was amazed that they just trusted me to figure it out. There is no how do you do this and how does it get done? I was approached by a children's book publisher, and they wanted to turn the Honey Bus into a picture book for little kids. And I said, yeah, I have no idea how to do that, but yeah, if someone approaches you, that they think you can do it, even if you think you can't do it, and you just fake it till you make it, and I was really honest. I said, I love this idea. I want to do it. I have never written for kids. I don't have kids. I have no idea what I'm doing. If I can turn in 500 words of pure junk and you'll help me with it, then yes. And it worked. They were like, of course we'll help you with it. And so just be honest and people will help you.
Yeah, for sure. And not to have, and this is something that comes up all the time too, is not to have that scarce mindset that if somebody else is getting this particular byline here, it means you can't ever do it. I forget who I was talking to about that point, but they saw it as if so and so got published there in that capacity, that doesn't mean I can't, it means I can. They actually they are actually opening the door, they're actually kind of blazing the trail instead of closing the door off. And it was such a brilliant, I wish I could remember who said it, because I've done more than 300 of these, so I sometimes forget who I talk to. But it's someone said that they viewed it as, seeing someone publish there meant, that gives me the opportunity to. And I was like, that's a great way of reframing it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so many people have helped me that have paved the way. I remember when I was still writing for the San Francisco Chronicle, I was interviewing an author from San Francisco, Josh Moore. He wrote Termite Parade and a bunch of great just novels and memoirs about sort of the bar scene in San Francisco, and then also fatherhood when he had a baby. But at the time, I was unpublished, and I would interview every author I could to ask them about their work, but then I would inevitably switch the conversation over to, well, how did you get an agent, and how does this work? And then they'd catch on pretty quickly that I was trying to do it too. And Josh said, "All right, lady, what are you working on? What's your book about?" And it was the Honey Bus. And he said, "Well, I want to read it." And he did. And they said, "This is great. I want to show it to my agent." And he did. He showed it to his agent. His agent didn't want it, but his agent knew somebody who might. And then that's how that happened. Oh, but during the interview, when I was interviewing him about his book, he said something I'll never forget. And he said, every writer's job is 50% to work on their own work and 50% to help bring other writers up. And I never forgot that. I think that's really true. So yeah, I try to pass forward what he did and help people and connect people and, show them my book proposals if they're working on one. You just whatever, because the whole publishing industry is so intentionally mysterious that it's difficult, and you can really help each other figure it out. And that's what, for sure, that's what we all should be doing.
Yeah. There, I remember just when this was, I think, around the time that, say, like MacArthur grants were coming out, like, I remember, like, everyone's on Twitter just talking about it. And I just was like, and that's just one example, but there are so many other grants or fellowships that so many people don't even know that they're there, or two, that you can, like, actually apply for, that you're not just plucked out of the air. And to your point of, like, some of this information is so secretive and so privileged, it's like it can be really dispiriting to know that, like, oh, those are there for you, but they're kind of just, you have to know someone who knows someone who knows someone in order to, like, even apply for it, which is just, it just kind of puts people in corners that they can't get out of, and they get jaded and they give up. So, like, just think of all the other people who are just not capable of getting their work out there, not because they're not talented and not working hard enough, but just because they simply don't know. And that's part of the community building element of it, where you just have to be like, hey, I know of this thing. Here's information. Apply for it.
For sure. I tell everybody I can about Hedgebrook, which is a writer's retreat in Whidbey Island off the coast of Washington State, up near Seattle. That it's a writing retreat. It's women only, I should say, but another writer friend in San Francisco who I interviewed for the Chronicle, I told him I was going to pay to go somewhere and study writing. And he said, pay? No. You're the artist. You're an artist in residence. They pay you to stay, or not they pay you, but they'll fly you there and you stay for free and they feed you and you work on your work. And I'm like, what? So I didn't know what an artist residency was. And he told me about McDowell and Yaddo and all these ones he'd been to. And I thought, this is lovely. And he told me, you might really like Hedgebrook. And so I ended up going there for a while, and it blew my mind. It was the first time I called myself a writer with a W, because other people were. And, they flew me, and I stayed there for 3 or 4 weeks and worked on the proposal for the Honey Bus. Yes, I met the other women writers there who had been to lots of residencies, and I was asking a million questions. What's this? What's that? And now, I try to pass that on too, because why was that news to me? I've been in the writing community in San Francisco for a long time. I had no clue that you could get supported for your work. So yeah, we need to keep talking about this loud and clear.
For sure. And it brings up another point too. Like, I've written about horse racing a lot, and a bunch of years ago, a photographer I don't know his name, but he was, he had his work run in magazines for decades. Never won an Eclipse Award. Eclipse Award is kind of like the Pulitzer Prizes for horse racing writers. There's
Okay.
So that just to give you some context. So, he had wondered all the years. He was like, I've been doing these great work all these years, and I've never won an Eclipse Award. And it was like end of his life. And then someone told him, like, you have to submit your work to it. Like, you don't just get plucked.
Oh no, he was waiting to be tapped.
He was waiting to be chosen, and he had to put together enough stuff to then submit it to be judged. And I'm sure his editors could have done that for him, but they didn't. So it's always upon the writer, too, for whatever the anthology is, too. Like, oftentimes you have to submit your own work. You don't like to think that you have to be the biggest advocate for your work, that your editors might, but they're all overwhelmed and whatever. So if you have a piece that you think can be a Best American essay, you submit it to that editor. No one else is going to do it, and that's how these people get chosen, because they stood up for their own work. And here's this poor photographer who, talk about like kind of a death of a salesman kind of thing, and he just goes to his grave thinking that he wasn't getting the recognition he deserved, but he didn't know that he had to be his own advocate. It's just like so tragic.
Yeah, and that makes me think of oftentimes people who are trying to get published will contact me and ask questions, and I'll say, well, have you written a book proposal first? And they say, well, what's that? I mean, and that was also me. I did not understand the point of the proposal and what this document was.
Yeah.
And, the thing that saved me there was Brooke Warner has a book. She's with She Writes Press in San Francisco, and she wrote a book called, I might butcher this, but it's 12 Steps to a Memoir Proposal That Sells, something like that. And I just followed it to the T, and it worked out really well. But that's the other thing. Like, there's just so much confusion about how a book becomes published and gets out into the world. And yes, yeah, I mean, we really need to help each other.
Now, Meredith, as I like to bring these conversations to a close, I like asking guests for a recommendation of some kind for the listener. And I planted a little seed in your brain a while ago, and I'm wondering if maybe we can harvest that seed. So what recommendation might you have for listeners out there?
Well, you did plant the seed, and I thought about it, and I am digging this app right now. It's called Alfie. And Alfie, and it's a community space. It's an app for advancing women personally and professionally, and so they have these talks that are with these really amazing, badass women who are like the first women in their fields, or just so like they have Olympians on there giving talks. They have there's just a series on the very first female venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, judges, inventors, and they're all talking about their work, but they're all talking about how they trailblazed through these mostly male-dominated professions to get to their jobs, and then they are just so helpful with advice, and I'm really just digging this space. So I would say the Alfie app.
Nice. Is that ALFIE?
It's ALFY.
Fantastic. Well, Meredith, a pleasure as always. I'm glad we were able to do this for the second time. Too long in between conversations, but I'm so glad we were able to have the first one a few years ago, and then of course with your lovely new book, Loving Edie. So thanks so much for the time, Meredith, and best of luck with the book.
And thank you for having me. It was tons of fun as always.
Oh, wow. Did we do it? Did it happen again? Wow, you've made it to the end. I always like it when that happens. Thanks to Meredith for coming back on the show to talk a little shop and her amazing pup, Edie. You can see a couple photos of her at BrendanO'Mara.com. Hey. Subscribe to the show so you don't even have to think about it. I mean, we're everywhere, CNFers. And if you have a moment, leave a kind review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify. they go a long way. As I say before, for the wayward CNFer, if they see all those reviews of this show, they'll be like, oh, I don't know who that guy is, but that looks like a promising podcast. And I love writing memoir and essay or documentary film and narrative journalism. I'll give that guy a shot. Seems like he knows what he's talking about. Sometimes. This week, I gotta say, was kind of a rough one for me mentally. Like, okay, my entire life I've been somewhat of a depressive person, a bit of a buzzkill, a person my friends routinely avoid, a sheer joy to be around. This week I found myself kind of just sleeping a lot and not exercising and not really seeing the point to life at all. Like, it all seems incredibly pointless, am I right? I replied to a friend's Instagram story, quote, existential journaling this morning for your podcast host. You ever ask yourself, when was the last time I woke up excited for the day? 'Cause I can't. LOL. She didn't reply. Who can blame her? What can you even say to that? So my mind routinely and naturally drifts to, self-destructive behavior, as it does and has for decades. Listen, not going to do anything. And I'm not telling you this to make light of it. Trust me on that. Here's my point. The other day, I removed my head from my asshole and committed to writing a few hundred words of another sample chapter that I desperately need to finish for my book proposal. And for the first time in several days, I felt like really alive and engaged and kind of excited. Whereas before, all I wanted to do was curl up and disappear. And after writing those just 300 or so lousy words, just building the world. Yeah, if it was a damn fine session, like those 300 words, that was a big-ass win, and I sure as hell gave myself some fist bumps for that. I was flying high. I know some people say they write to make sense of the world, which escapes me, but I get it. I know some people say writing is pure torture. Listen, I understand it's not easy, but I don't really get that it's torture. It's just letters and words, man. It's hard to make it artful, and it can be raw and vulnerable. I mean, Exhibit A, bruh. But writing might just save your life. I don't know. Some big league chew for you. As I want to say, stay wild, CNFers. And if you can't do, interview. See ya.